You know, it's become kind of a tired trope that when we look into the future through video games, all we see is the barren wasteland. The horrific image of our planet turned asunder by the ravages of a race that hasn't had its fill of war. Whereas these images of the future can leave us in awe of how horrific things could be, it leaves me unsatisfied. I generally like to believe that mankind would never fall into the wasteland, but rather would prosper, as I don't see us as a truly evil race. Perhaps a beautiful bohemian world full of color and music. They can be as haunting as the irradiated leftovers of society, but can turn being beautiful in another light. I'm, of course, talking about the future that is Transistor. Released in 2014, Transistor was brought to the world by Supergiant Games. They hit it big with their first release, Bastion, and Transistor did amazingly well for a small studio. The difference between the two being that I hear people talk quite a bit about Bastion, even years after it's been released, but Transistor seemed to fly under the radar just a tiny bit. I mean, I've heard people go on and on about Bastion's music, its gameplay, its visual style, its mechanics. I just feel like Bastion's kind of like the Lion King and Transistor's like the Hunchback of Notre Dame. They're both really good, just one wasn't talked about a lot. And this just may be my ignorance to knowing people who actually played the game, but in all cases, I'm here to talk about it myself. And this just may be my ignorance to knowing people who actually played the game. But in all terms, I'm here to talk about it myself. But enough of this, you're here to hear about the game, and there is no better place to start with than the game's music. The soundtrack done by Darren Korb is amazing, and each song hits its intended emotion with such accuracy that you would almost feel that the game was built around the music rather than the music being befitting of the game. Though, defining the music style is a bit harder to do. Darren has gone on record calling the music old world electronic post-rock. That's an impressive title to say the least. Equally as impressive is Ashley Lynn Barrett's singing. Her vocals are soft and powerful, and more than enough reason to take a break from the everyday life and sit back and listen to the whole soundtrack. But we will come back to her in a little bit. The game's moving along, and we should be too. Our game starts as most interesting Saturday nights do, over the impaled corpse of what can be presumed to be a dead loved one. I know you may think I'm jumping the gun and making a giant assumption on this story already, but trust me, I have a good feeling that the sore's the reason that this dude is worm food. But believe it or not, our protagonist is alive. He's somehow been digitized and put inside this macro USB called the Transistor. But he's one part of our epic duo. Our other one is a lounge singer by the name of Red. No, not that Red. Try the video game Red. It's close, and you're being cute, but still, try another Red that's from video games. There you go. The only bad thing is, for being a singer, Red's voice has been trapped inside the Transistor somehow. I don't ever think this is really explained, but her voice is sealed inside, but not her soul. But the more you stew over it, you realize it really isn't important. But you don't have time to sit there and idle on your current predicament, as it appears that Apple has finally had enough of a world driven by PCs and sends out a tiny overpriced attack drone after you. With your only defense being a giant USB, I'm sure you're thinking that it's all over. But fret not, young citizen, for our USB has come equipped with different .exe files, featuring such exe files as lasers, grenades, and a pet pooch. After defeating the robot threat, now named the Process, you unlock the current section of the city you're trapped in, and begin to retrace your steps going back to the theater where this all started tonight. Soon after you start your journey back to the theater, you come upon one of the most pleasant surprises in this game. A corpse! But don't worry, the Process has been thinking green, and everything you find that's dead can be reused. Just go over and make like Shao Kahn, suck her soul right into the transistor, and unlock brand new powers beyond imagination, like laser beams. If everyone could be a digitalized weapon, then this world would be a safer place. Speaking of powers, the game gives you two different options to use them. You can play on the fly, aiming out skill shots, or you can go into a turn-based mode, where you have a bar that slowly regenerates depending on how much power you use out of it. Personally, I definitely preferred the turn mode, as some of the skill shots seemed rather hectic. Though the power themselves are done amazingly well. You get over a dozen different powers that combine and work with one another in way different scenarios. Don't like the crash ability, just shooting out a laser? Well, in the little box underneath it, put the dash ability. That way, you'll also do a wicked power slide when you shoot your laser, making you twice the character you were before. As you can see, not all the power combinations are super great, but it does give you a little bit of fun time to mess around with them and see what you like. And even later in the game, you can start equipping powers to Red herself, giving her the ability to be invisible in the beginning of the fight, or allowing her to just be a little bit faster. Limiters are another thing presented to equip in the Transistor. A set of debuffs put inside the sword, allowing you to level faster while not having as great of abilities. The limiters can range from putting shells around the cells you need to collect, or giving up some of the juice that powers your abilities. Generally, I didn't find much of a use for them, other than adding in a pseudo difficulty setting. After a while, finding your way through the waves of protocol, you make your way back to the theater, seeing what they've done to your beautiful city of Cloudbank, slowly turning it into a blank canvas. After a nice little trip down memory lane, we come to the first boss of the game, Sybil Rise. And she's a bit of a jarring fight because she's the first protocol that we've fought that has multiple forms, let alone she's also backed up by other protocol. Though from her defeat, we finally get some answers about what all is going on in the city of Cloudbank. We find out that a secret society known as the Camerata are planning to wipe the city clean with the protocol. Their end goal is to rewrite the city using the transistor in their own image. But since you took their brush, they no longer have any way to paint the city as they see fit, and the protocol are now out of control. The main story has been rather light up to this point, but that's because the game lets you explore its rather deep world at your own pace. As you walk through the gorgeous scenery, you will come upon these small stations that give you small news feeds about the city, its residents, and its current events. The powers you've been gaining as well hold the backstory for all the characters that you've drawn them from, allowing you to sort out their candid past and allowing you to see their final moments and what they were doing before this whole incident happened. My personal favorite being Sybil's. It's really kind of sad to see how she did everything she did for the love of Red. Her crazed want for love from Red reminds me of a story of a bishop who fell in love with a gypsy. Boom! Brought it back to Hunchback of Notre Dame. And if exploring these stories doesn't interest you in the least bit, your boyfriend in a blade is constantly talking to you, and his dialogue, though a bit heavy-handed at times, is written pretty well.
Welcome to High Rise. Welcome home. Hear that?
Having obtained identity of the culprits behind these horrific events, Red takes off after the Camerata. But their fortress tower is guarded heavily by a giant dragon protocol. A dragon protocol. Well, like an all-seeing zit on a dragon protocol. Let's just say it has a very satisfying song written about it called The Spine, which is oddly not used during the fight. But hey, Sword Boyfriend gets kinda fucked up during this and sounds like he's drunk. But the time has finally come to fight the Camerata. You make your way up their secret base. All the time, Asher Krendel talks to you about how this wasn't what the Camerata wanted. He even goes on to apologize for the goings-on in the city, and points out that they were wrong and it was a mistake for them to try and change things. and that they are willing to accept the consequences for their actions. And they do this by taking their own lives. That's right. 2 of the 4 members of the Camerata decide to go out with a whimper rather than a bang. But loss is a rather big theme in this game, and I think this may be the best representation, or at least the boldest, that is shown. That being said, there's 1 Camerata left, and rather than taking the way out that the others did, he asks Red to help set right the city that's been wronged. With that comes backtracking through the older parts of the game, and you get to see all the damage that has been done to Cloudbank, and how horrific a blank canvas really can be. I know I haven't talked about it a lot yet, and that's because I couldn't find a place to put it, but I need to talk about the art style of this game right here, right now. If you want, you can skip this part because art is subjective, but I'm going to sit here and gush for a minute. This game is bar none some of the most beautiful work I have ever seen come out of the industry. Whether you're talking about the unique architecture that looms in somewhat between modern Gothic to current modern surrealism, or this color palette that mixes in so well with the vibrant showcase of bright greens and blues that accentuate the dark browns and give it a true sense of a dark world without throwing black everywhere. The character designs that look like futuristic turn-of-the-century culture. Even the design of the protocol is fantastic, as it clashes so hard against everything else represented in the game, with their futuristic smooth edges and sleekness, when surrounded by these hard-edged framing of the world. I feel like I'm looking at a collection of oil paintings as I play this game, each telling more and more about a bittersweet love story that can only end one way. That being said, we are at the ending of the game. Here's your spoiler warning. Play this game before watching the end of this review. If not for the art that was taken with such tender love and care, then for the moving soundtrack or the excellent gameplay, this game delivers in every way possible. I love this game, and not watching the end of this review won't hurt me, but it'll hurt how you accept this game. Go finish the game before watching the end of this review. Spoiler warning's done. Here we go. So you fight your way through the old bits of Cloudbank and head off to meet Royce Brackett, the last of the Camerata, and the man who thinks he can fix everything that's going on. After fighting through a completely processed version of Fairview, in which you get to see that the process has begun to evolve into more humanoid form, you come upon Royce and the Cradle. Once the transistor is placed back in the cradle, the process can be turned off, and we can set about setting everything back to the way it should be.
But I will see you again. I will see you again.
Once the transistor is locked into the cradle, you come to find out you and Royce have been dragged in as well, and only one of you is getting out. In what feels like should be the hardest fight of the game, you fight Royce, who is now armed with his own version of the transistor. I don't know why, but in my opinion this fight is really easy. Once you find some combinations that you like, you have to take on Royce 4 times, one for each of his own powers, and then you're released, while he is doomed to spend the rest of eternity in the transistor along with everyone else.
We got away.
Red and her nameless lover make their way back to the beginning of Cloudbank, turning back the destruction of the process and returning everything to its original form.
Look at this.
That is, till you come upon the body of your fallen love.
Wait.
He informs you that there is no returning him to this life. But you have the feeling Red already knew that. She sets down the transistor.
Dare.
She lies next to him, and with some new form of psychic power, manages to lift the transistor without actually touching it. His voice comes out, begging her not to do what he thinks she's going to do. But it's too late. She's made up her mind. Red takes the transistor and plunges it into her stomach, taking her own life. The music begins to play, and we get to see small scenes of the life that they had beforehand. Just messing with you. After the credits, it's shown that they end up living together inside the transistor at a little farm. And you finally get to hear Red speak. And of course, it's Ashley Barrett. If you can't tell by now, I love this game. There's just not a lot like it in terms of presentation, storytelling, or music. Do yourself a favor, go pick it up. It's a great game. You won't regret it. Till next time.